Hello and welcome to the TUE Brew Review. This week we are checking out not one, not two, but three beers. And they all hail from the same brewer and are roughly the same style. Guinness. We have Guinness Draught Stout. This is the stout that 90% of the people, when they have a Guinness in the United States, this is the version that they are consuming. We also have Guinness Extra Stout. This is widely available in the United States, but is a distant second to the draft version. We'll touch on that in just a moment. But then I have a third version. This is also Guinness Extra Stout, but this was actually not made for export. This was actually produced to be consumed in Ireland. And a shout out to my good friend Tony and his lovely bride Chelsea, who actually brought this back with her on a recent trip to Ireland. And very excited to compare and contrast this beer with its other imported stout brethren. Well, two things that really separate this beer from its from the Granddaddy beer. First of all, obviously the recipe, as I mentioned, it's a little bit lighter in body and character. But what really separates this beer from this is the gases that they put into this. These, like most beers, are driven by CO2 and carbonated through carbon dioxide or CO2. This beer uses a carbon dioxide nitrogen mix. So nitrogen and CO2, they're both gases that carbonate the beer, but nitrogen adds a few things to the party. First of all, the nitrogen bubbles are smaller. Number two, nitrogen does not dissolve in liquid. So it will come out of the liquid very quickly, which is why you have to have a widget in these beers to contain the nitrogen, and I'll touch on that in a second. And third, nitrogen is a neutral pH gas, where CO2 lowers the pH of the liquid, and it actually adds a little bit of acidity to the beer, which for some beers it helps to kind of bring out some of the flavors and nuances. But when you combine that factor, neutral pH, it doesn't dissolve in the beer, and it's got smaller bubbles, you get this smoother flavor. You get that rich, creamy texture that those who've had a Guinness on draft have come to know and appreciate. And in 1988, Guinness came up with this guy. They came up with the widget. And there's actually a widget. You can maybe hear it. Trust me, there is one inside of here. Because again, nitrogen won't it won't isomerize in the solution or be held in the liquid. So they had to put this plastic widget in there, which actually holds the nitrogen in there until you open the can up, and that releases of all of the nitrogen, and you get that big, rich, creamy, foamy head, which is similar to the same experience that you get when you have it on draft at your favorite tavern. And actually, in 1988, they came out with the plastic widget for cans, and about 10 years later, they managed to develop the widget, which is in bottles now, so you can get cans or bottles of draft stout. So enough of me talking. Let's get to drinking some beers. So we're going to start off with this Guinness Draft, and you'll notice when I open it, it just released the nitrogen. You might have been able to hear that. You got to pour it vigorously. And there you get those real fine nitrogen bubbles that are actually coming out of the solution, and there was also some CO2 gas in there. But you get this visually appealing beer. Beer, like any food product, you should use all of your senses to enjoy and appreciate it. And seeing the beer being poured is certainly a delight to the eyes. At least I think so. So there you got that nice kind of muddy brown color. You've got that thick, creamy, classic beige head. Oh, getting the aromatics of like cocoa, fairly sweet, a little bit grainy, but more sweet than grainy. Oh yeah, the flavors. Sweet malt flavors, chocolatey, a little bit fruity in there as well. And that fruitiness is definitely to style. A lot of the English and Irish style ales, you'll get that nice fruity ale yeast character. But the one thing that I always find so interesting about this beer is it's looks are deceiving, because a lot of people, when they see the dark beer, they think it's rich, heavy, viscous, and this is the exact opposite. It's got a light body. It's very velvety. Again, with the nitrogen, that helps a lot. Sweet, maybe semi-dry, but more sweet, it's actually lighter in alcohol, calories, and carbohydrates than your American mega lagers. So this, again, lower calories and alcohol than Budweiser, Miller High Life, Coors Banquet beer, all of those big American standard lagers. But tons of flavor, but not too much. It's still a fairly easy sipper, a little bit sweet, but it's that velvety mouthfeel that it has that makes it so unique. So a delicious standard. So now we're going to move up to this is the original recipe, extra stout. Again, this was brewed back in the early 19th century. And by the way, you'll notice that there's a couple things on I think you'll see it on every bottle of Guinness. You'll see the harp, and the harp is called the BREW harp. It's basically a symbol of Ireland. He was the last High King of Ireland. He was a big art advocate and I guess quite the harp player. So you'll see the harp in all of the Guinness products. There it is on the label there. There it's very prominent on this can. And a lot of times you'll also see the signature here of Arthur Guinness. So his signature is on the bottle. So I believe Arthur the Senior was the one that founded the brewery in 1759, and then his son Arthur Guinness II, I think, took it and grew it from there. So again, enough chatter. Let's go ahead and get into this beer. So this is what's called an extra stout, and again, this is widely available. It's made in Ireland but imported to the U.S., and it's widely available here in the United States, although not nearly as popular as its draft counterpart. So this beer's got, you can see it's got a little more oomph to it already. It's got it's a little bit darker in color, more of a kind of a dark, it's black, ruby to black color, a little bit of a reddish hue, but definitely also in the color and in the head, it's darker. It's got a little bit more of a dark malt look to it. And the nose is this, it follows suit. Not overpowering, but you get a really nice roast malt character, maybe a little bit coffee-like in there as well. Cheers. And flavor follows suit. Definitely more malt, roast malt heft to it. That acrid, like the coffee type of roast flavor, much more so than where this is more sweet. This is more peppery. It's a little bit tart too. Instead of fruity, it's got a little bit of like a sour character to it, just a slight sour character, which is to style. Definitely more roast, dries out in the palate more, got more of a bite, but more of a dry finish to it, where this finishes a little smoother and sweeter. This is just a little bit more bold, but still very approachable, very drinkable. I want to say this runs about 4.2% ABV, and this runs about 5.5%. So it's got a little bit more heft to it, but still, a lot less than some of your, American IPAs, which run north of 7%. This is still bordering on a sessionable beer. So, last but not least, let's get into this guy. So this is the original extra stout. So recipe-wise, I think it should be close to this, but I couldn't help notice here on the back that alcohol says 4.2% ABV. So that would put it closer to this one. So I'm intrigued to see how this is all going to come out. And you can see this bottle is quite a bit bigger. These here, I think this is just under a pint. This one here is about 12 ounces, I think just under 12 ounces. And this is actually an imperial pint, 568 milliliters to be exact, which is about 20 ounces. This beer traveled thousands of miles just to be here in my little my little experiment. So very similar to the Guinness Extra Stout. It's actually the head on it seems to be not quite as frothy, but color-wise, it's just about the same. Again, I would call it a shade, maybe a shade darker than the Draught Stout. Has a little bit of a sour vegetal aromatics to it, and that could just be from the fact that it's traveled quite a bit. Very mellow flavor. It's just got a touch of dark malt to it, but very little toast. This one has got a lot more toast to it. The middle one, the Guinness Extra Stout that's imported to the U.S., has a lot more heft to it than this one. But it because it's packaged with carbon dioxide, it doesn't have the creaminess or the sweetness, for that matter, of the Draught. This is definitely a session beer. So this is definitely something you'd go to Ireland, 4% beer, and sit, and you could drink several of these in an evening at your favorite Irish pub. So really glad that I got a chance to try all these beers side by side, and I hope you enjoyed my little experiment here. And there you have it. 3 different versions of Guinness Stout. So thanks so much for putting up with this and watching it. Hope you enjoyed it. Salancha.